welcome to Good Friday in Holy Week. We are almost at Easter and our baking is almost at an end. I hope you enjoyed our turnovers from yesterday. I thought they were delicious and I hope that you did too. Now today is going to be our mammoth bake, the biggest one that we have yet, which is hot cross buns. And it takes so long because there's 3 different times where it's going to need proving, which means leaving in a warm place for an hour to kind of increase the size and wait for our yeast to impact the flour. Now I'll go through some information in a minute, but we need to get going to get some stuff heating on the hob, so I'll do that first and then I'll talk to you. Now again, I've got all of my ingredients weighed out already, just to make it a bit easier for me to pick things up and go along, but don't feel you need to do that. Just pause the video whenever you need to get your ingredients. And as always, the instructions will be at the end and the ingredient list at the beginning of our video. So we're starting off, we need to mix together some milk and some butter. So I've got 300 millilitres of whole fat milk, which is going to go into a little pan, along with 50 grams of butter. Now, the whole point of this is that the butter is going to melt into the milk. So I'm going to put that on the hob now to start warming up while we go through what's going on this morning. So hot cross buns are really the obvious thing to make on Good Friday. Lots of people will be eating them, and it's traditional in church. People have them after the service. Now we don't know if we're going to be having services this year. Different churches will be able to do things differently, and we certainly don't think we'll be able to share refreshments. So if you can make these yourself, then you can eat them, enjoy them after whatever worship you do manage to get to. So the other good thing about making these hot cross buns is that they're a yeasted bun, like I said before. I've got my yeast here already. And yeasted buns take a bit of time, so it's a good opportunity to spend some time thinking about various different elements of our Easter story. Some church traditions have a service that runs between 12 and 3 o'clock, which is the time that Jesus spent on the cross, and we can read about that in the Bible. So maybe you could make your hot cross buns between 12 and 3 and use those 3 hours to reflect on the story and the pain and the wonder that we have in Good Friday. So Good Friday, if you don't know already, is the day that Jesus was crucified on the cross. All the events of Holy Week led up to this most important event in the history of Christianity and, I would argue, the world. So it's a really, really important day. And there's a lot of emotions that go alongside it. The sadness of Good Friday isn't fulfilled until the joy of Easter Sunday. So spending some time thinking about that sadness is really important and is part of the life of being a Christian. So while we're mixing our butter, which is gently simmering away on the hob, you can think about the butter will be melting and then mixing in with the milk. And you might want to think about that time in the Eucharist or the communion service when the priest mixes a little water in with the wine. I don't know if you've ever noticed that during communion. There's always a bit of water poured in. And he says, by the mystery of this wine and water, may we share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. There might be different words that the priest uses for you, but it's something along those lines. And it's all to do with the fact that the Jesus that we follow is both fully human and fully God. Neither of them takes away from the other, and he was completely human, completely God. And yet today he's going through the most brutal of punishments, and because he was fully human, he suffered in the same way that you or I would. Because Jesus fully shares in our humanity and understands the pain and the sorrow that we go through. So I'm going to see how our milk is doing. So we're starting to get there. This is one of those things you need to be patient about a little bit. So you just need to be patient and give it some time to melt gently, because you don't want the milk getting too hot and risking burning. So I don't know if you can see that. The butter is now melted into the milk. I'm going to take it off the heat and wait for a few minutes for it to cool back down to sort of hand temperature, so that if you put your hand in it, it wouldn't burn. Whereas at the moment it's too hot and it would scald it. Now I don't know if you can see, but at the moment my ingredients are split into two piles. And the reason for that is that these ones over here, which is all my fruit and my spices, I'm not going to be using until later on. We need to do our first stage, making the basic dough itself, before we get on to that one. So we're going to make a start on the dry ingredients, which are ready here. I've already weighed out my flour and sieved it into a bowl. I've got 500 grams of strong bread flour. Now it's important to have strong flour rather than your normal plain flour, because the strong one will give it a bit of strength so you can knead it and mold it a bit later on. I haven't actually tried it with plain flour, I don't know how well it will work, so see if you can pick up some strong bread flour from the supermarket instead. Now I've sieved it into the bowl because I want to make sure that I'm going to have a nice smooth batter, and you won't have that if it's sticking in lumps together. There's 500 grams of strong bread flour. I'm going to add in a teaspoon of salt, which I've got here. One thing to be careful of is looking where you put your salt into the bowl, because you don't want it to be touching your yeast later on. So my salt's there. And I've got 75 grams of caster sugar, which I'm going to put on the other side of the bowl. There we go. Don't need to worry too much about caster sugar with sieving, because it's quite fine anyway. And then the last thing I've got is my yeast. So there's 7 grams of yeast here. If you get yeast in a packet, which most yeast does come in that way, I just happen to have a tub myself, then it's already weighed out into 7 grams, so you don't need to worry too much about it. But if you have a tub instead, then it's 7 grams in a bowl. I'm going to put it on top of my flour, but for the time being away from the sugar and definitely away from the salt, because you don't want it to damage the yeast in any way. So it's a fast action yeast that we're looking for rather than a live yeast. That's a whole different measure of things. But if you're in the supermarket, the fast yeast or easy blend yeast is going to be the one that's easiest to come across, so don't worry too much about that. Let's grab a fork. So as we put our dry ingredients into the bowl, we might want to have a think about what we can bring to the foot of the cross today. As Christians, we believe that when Jesus died on the cross, he died for all of our sins. So all of our sins there died with him. So the sins are the things that we do wrong, so the things we feel guilty or ashamed of. So with our dry ingredients in the bowl, is there anything that you maybe feel a bit guilty or ashamed of today? You don't need to tell anybody, just have a think about it as we put it into the bowl, and then we're kind of imagining bringing it before Jesus so that it dies with him on the cross today. Okay, so in the time it's taken my milk and butter mixture to cool down, my not so helpful little helper has woken up, so this is going to get a lot more difficult, but there we are. So at this stage, the other thing that you're going to need is an egg, which I've already broken into a bowl here, just very lightly beaten so that the white and the yolk are mixed together. And then with a spoon, it's going to make a well in the middle of our dry ingredients. So push each section to the side, make a nice little hole in the middle. And then we are going to add our wet ingredients into that well. So when they're in, we're going to mix them together, first with a wooden spoon, and then with our hands to form a dough. So at this point, you don't need to worry about the salt and the yeast mixing together anymore. It was just that initial stage. So we're going to start off with a wooden spoon to start to incorporate everything together. And then when it's all nicely mixed in, we will switch to using our hands, or hand, to make it into a nice dough that we'll be able to do some more work with. So as you can see, we're just folding it together with the spoon here, but you'll find out that unlike with a cake, there is a little bit too much dry ingredients for the wet ingredients, so you won't be able to do the whole thing with a spoon because you need to use your hands at the end to just bring it together. And get a little bit of flour back in. Put in the egg as well. Probably should have done that earlier. So what happens when you get distracted? So before we forget, we're going to make sure that that egg goes in the tube. mixing that together. As you can see, it's coming together as a dough. That's going to be a warm mixture, which is really important because of that milk. And it's important because you want it to be, you need it to be warm to activate that yeast. So the yeast needs warmth and it needs sugar to be able to work and to make the flour, make the mixture grow. So it's really important to make sure that your milk is still warm, but you don't leave it for too long before you take it out. Right, I'm going to get my hands into that in a moment. But we're going to put some flour onto a surface, onto my kitchen surface here. And the next stage is going to be kneading the dough together so that it becomes nice and silky and a pliable workable dough. At the moment, it's a bit wet, so we need to make sure that all the flour is incorporated in and use a little bit more flour to make sure that it's exactly the texture that we want to. So I'll just grab some flour. I'm just going to use plain flour for this bit rather than the bread flour that we were using earlier, because it's mainly bread flour in our dough now, so we should be okay. Let's see if I can get it open. There we are. So make sure we clear all the things off the counter so I've got a nice big space to work with. Again, making sure that your hands are clean before you start touching food with them. Okay, so we can tip. Oh, even tip. We might just have to use our spoon. As you can see, it's still a really wet mixture, so we definitely need to do some more work with that because that is not going to get us anywhere. Make sure we get as much of the dough out as we can, so we're putting it back in this bowl when it's ready to be worked with. So we scrape off. Now, kneading, I know, darling, kneading is easier with two hands, but I'm not going to be able to demonstrate that because I now only have one hand. So because it's such a wet dough, I'm going to keep adding a lot more flour until it stops sticking, like you can see on the bottom there. Now, this is, as this is family flour, it's not the end of the world if I put floury hands back in the pot, but obviously you might just need to check that with an adult if you do the same thing. So as you can see, even that little bit of flour is starting to bring it together into much more of an easier dough to work with. Now it's still sticking a little bit, so we're going to keep going a little bit longer. And it's still sticking to my hands a bit as well, which we also don't really want just yet. You want to keep turning it in the flour, make sure it's all working in. Try and make sure you get those straggly bits mixed into it as well. Keep adding a bit more flour just to burn them up. Yeah. Now, obviously, Charlotte is a little bit too small to be helping me. She may not be able to work out what to do with this dough without trying to eat it. But if you do have young other children who want to help, then kneading is a really good way of getting them involved. You could split up the dough so people have their own little bit to knead, or you could give them some to take it in turns. So if you do have kids who want to get involved, there's no reason why they shouldn't. Just make sure hands are clean as they are with you as well. But little ones this age, I think, I may not quite have got the idea of what we're trying to do. That's definitely starting to look a little bit happier. Not quite there, but almost. Fortunately, it's only sticking to one hand because I'm only using one hand. I'm trying to, because my hands are clean, I'm just trying to make sure that all the dough that's getting caught to my fingers does end up back in the pile so that we don't waste any by having to just wash it off. There we are. It does make your counter very messy, so if you are worried about that, you could put something on the counter first, and it's not something that's going to get pulled up. When I was younger, we used to have a big glass sheet that you put over the table to help knead things or roll things out. And you can get big plastic sheets as well, which cover a lot of space. So if you have one of those, feel free to use one of those. I'm just going to end up cleaning my counter afterwards. So if you are a child doing this and your parent isn't around, make sure you clean the counter afterwards, or they won't be very impressed. Right, I think that will do for now. I'll just try and get off these last bits from my fingers. You can do that by rubbing your hands together, and that will kind of get it to come off in little clumps. This is why it's really important to make sure that our hands are clean. So we'll just try and get those last little clumps in, pick those up. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to put it back in the bowl for the time being. And this is when the first prove is going to happen. So we pop it in there, and then I need a little piece of cling film to go over the top of the bowl. Because you need to cover the bowl because you don't want the dough to form a skin on it, because then it has to dry a bit, it has to be worked back into the dough. So just try and make sure that it stays nice and smooth by covering it with cling film, or you could use a clean tea towel. But because this dough is going to rise now because of the yeast in it, you can't leave the cling film as it is, so you want to stick to the top as it rises that far. So I'm just going to spray some oil over my cling film, and then put the oiled cling film over the bowl so that if it rises that far, it's not going to stick to it. There we go. So this is going to stay in a warm place for about an hour. So warm place could be on a window ledge in the sun. Unfortunately, it's not sunny for me here today, so it might be for you, or it could be in an airing cupboard. If you're very fancy, like on Bake Off, and have a proving drawer in your oven, then feel free to put it there. It could be near a radiator on a shelf above it or something, so somewhere nice and warm for the yeast to work. We're going to leave it for about an hour until it's doubled in size, and then when you press a finger into it, it leaves a little dent, so you'll be able to feel it's quite puffy. So we'll see you back in an hour. When we come back, we're going to be putting in our fruit and spices. So check out the ingredients list coming up now, and make sure they're ready for your dough when it comes out. And we'll see you again in an hour. Hello, so welcome back. It has now been an hour and my dough has got a little bit better. It's still feeling quite warm and it's nice and springy when you touch it. So our next stage is going to be adding in all of the yummy fruit and spices that's going to make it taste really good. Yeah, so I'm starting to do it with this one here, so we'll still see how well we get on. But the way that we're going to be putting it in is by kneading it again. So I'm going to make sure that my surface is nice and floury again. Ooh, there we are. I turn out my dough onto the surface. It doesn't want to come out, but that's fine. So I'm still feeling lovely and warm and soft. So nice big bowl. There we are. So like I said, I have got my ingredients measured out already. But again, you don't have to. And also this bit is where the ingredients get a bit more flexible, and you can really put in whatever ingredients you want to at this point. So the ingredients that I put up were a suggestion. If you don't have these in the house already, don't worry about rushing out and making sure you bought absolutely everything. It's fine. So the first thing on the list was 75 grams of sultanas, but you could use raisins or currants either way. So I've got my dog being loud in the background. So I've got 75 grams of raisins in mine. I've also got 50 grams of mixed peel, which I was quite fortunate to have in the house already. I've also got a very lucky child here. There. Okay, done? Right. So yeah, I've got some mixed peel and some raisins. If you don't have mixed peel but you have an orange, for example, you could cut up some bits of the orange rind, and if you could really bothered, you could even put them in a sugar syrup to crystallise them like mixed peel is. I'm just going to put everything on top of my dough for now, because in a moment I'm going to be kneading it all in, or mixing it all in. So just empty everything. My mixture is quite sticky, which is why it's taking a little while to get it off my fingers. But that's okay. So that's that. I've also put in some fresh fruit in, which you don't always get in hot cross buns. I've got an apple here, which I've peeled and cored and cut into little pieces. So that's just going to kind of put on the top. It's very messy at the moment, but when I start kneading it in, we'll make sure that all these bits are included. Now, apple is one that you might decide to leave out. It's less common, I suppose. And we've also got some orange zest, which is when you just kind of grate the peel of an orange. That's going to go in. I'll give it a nice bit of flavour. And the other thing that I'm going to add for flavour is a teaspoon of cinnamon. Now, if you don't have cinnamon, that's fine. If you've got some mixed spice, you can put that in, or even some cloves or some ginger. You okay? Yeah? Just sprinkle that on top and make sure it's included. What's the matter? Get your hand out your mouth. Right. Yeah, cloves would work, or ginger, any of those kind of sweet spices that we get. Right. Put the lid back on. So my next step then, once I've cleared up the baby's milk, is going to be to try and knead this all in together. So I'm just going to try and put her on the counter for a sec. And then the kneading is the folding it into the mixture. And you want to try and make sure that you're getting your spices and your fruit out into as much of the mixture as you can. You want to try and spread them out quite a lot. So there's going to be a lot of folding and turning over. You want to pour the orange? You are. So again, we're getting a little bit messy, but it's fine. I'll get you some in a minute, okay? And this is going to get very sticky as well. So it's just a case of keeping tearing and folding to try and get as much of that fruit, it's going over the floor here as well, and spices in as possible. There you go. It's definitely, again, much easier if you don't have a small child trying to help you with it. So fold it all into the back. This is going to be really, really full of fruit. So we need to make sure that it's got into as much of the dough as we possibly can. And making sure it's nice and even. I know. Yeah. Do you want a piece of apple? What? Not sure about that, are you? There we are. So these are going to be very, very fruity. So if you didn't have as much food to go in as I did, then don't worry, because these are going to be really full, and you may not like your hot cross buns as full of fruit as this anyway. You might want to put less in, you might want to put different ingredients in. Just you can be as experimental with this as you'd like to be. If you make hot cross buns every year, then why not try something different this year? Cool. Okay. So as we're kneading, it's quite therapeutic actually, this being able to turn it around and push it out. People who bake bread do say that baking bread is therapeutic for this reason, so do enjoy this stage of it. And as we're kind of beating the dough and pushing our hands into it, trying to knock it around as much as we can. What did you do? Maybe you could remember the way that Jesus was pummeled at the hands of the soldiers, and how before the dough can rise, it has to be pummeled too. And then it turns into something that will feed all of us, not like Jesus was. The way that he was able to help all of us was by going through this difficult process where he was hurt and ultimately killed for us. So one last little lot of flour to make sure it's not too sticky. There we go. And then when all my fruit is in, I'm going to have a nice, very sweet smelling dough here, full of raisins and apples and orange. And it's going to taste lovely. So that is going to go back into my warm spot again, back in the bowl with the cling film on top for another hour. And after that hour, we're going to be shaping it into balls before one final proof before it gets baked. So I'll see you again in another hour. Okay, so it's been another hour, and as you can see, my dough has risen considerably. You can see all the fruit. We can see a little bit where the cinnamon is running through. So this looks great, great. So we have one more set of rolling out and leaving to cool before we can finally bake these. Now the last one is going to be making them into the buns that we are after for our hot cross buns. Obviously, this is absolutely massive, so you would not be baking this as it is. So we are going to just tip it out and knead it a little bit to make sure that it's not too sticky. And then divide this into smaller pieces for our hot crust buns. Now I find that the easiest way of dividing up dough is to try and keep it in even numbers. So I'm going to try and get mine into 16 pieces. You could do yours into 12 if you want a slightly bigger buns. But I'm going to do mine onto 16. So I'm going to start off cutting it roughly in half. And I know I need to get 8 pieces out of each half of the dough. Let's tear the last bit. And again, 4 out of each of those. Beautifully doughy here. Those. So 2 out of each piece here, 2. Feel it getting pretty sticky, so I'm going to cut these up, and then before I actually roll them into balls, we are going to be rolling them a bit of flour to stop them being too sticky. So there's 2 in from each of these balls. I'm going to just cut them all up before I get nice floury hands to roll them up into the right shape. Now they're not going to be all exactly the same size as you can see, but that's not the end of the world. They need them to be more or less the same so they cook evenly. But it doesn't matter too much if they're not all perfect. You're not going to be judged on your uniformity on this one. So 2 there, 2 there. You can of course just pull them apart, but I just find it a little bit easier to at least start off with a knife. Okay, so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 pieces. So I'm just going to sprinkle some flour over the whole lot, and then each of these pieces we're going to roll up into a little ball and then put onto a baking sheet lined with paper. That's baking paper. So when you put them onto the sheet, you don't want to put them too close together because they are still going to do a bit of expanding both here and probably a little bit in the oven too. So make sure they're nice circular shapes and then keep them a little bit apart. So this baking sheet is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to put 6 on one and try and fit 10 on the other because I don't have exactly the same size sheets and I want to make sure they don't run into each other. I'll be back in a moment when I've rolled out all 16 of these, but you don't need to watch me do all of them. You get the idea of how we're doing it here. Okay, so I'm on my last bun here. My sheets are looking a little bit full, so I'll just have to try and make the most of the space as much as I can and move them out to the sides. So those are like that. So we're going to leave these again for another hour in that warm place to rise a little bit more. So we need to cover them again, so make sure they don't form that skin. You can either do it with your oiled cling film, but make sure that you don't wrap it this time, just leave it lightly over the top because you don't want it to constrict their expanding. Or you could use a clean tea towel, which is what I'm going to do for these ones, because otherwise it's just a massive piece of plastic. So we'll be back again in about an hour. In the last little bit of that, you can start preheating your oven to 200 degrees or 220 if you haven't got a fan oven. And before we put them in the oven, we're going to need to be making a cross on them. They're called hot cross buns for a reason. For that, you're going to need 75 grams of plain flour. So we'll see you again in an hour when we finish up with these lovely buns. Okay, we are nearly there. Well done if you've made it this far. There's just going to be one more step now before we shove them in the oven. So of course a hot cross bun is called a hot cross bun for a reason. It's not just a bun. So the last thing we need to do is make the crosses for our buns. While I'm doing this last step, I've got the oven heating up to 200 degrees or 220 if you don't have a fan oven. So we're going to use 75 grams of flour with some water to make a paste, and then we're just going to use that paste to pipe a cross onto each of our buns. So we're going to add in a little bit of water at a time. And we're just making it into a very thick paste here. Yeah. So it doesn't matter too much if this one is a bit lumpy, because it's just going to be a single line on the top of each of the buns. You won't notice it at all. Now, if you don't have any more flour or you can't be bothered with this last step, you could stop it. You could just cut a cross in the top of your bun with a knife, but this one will definitely stand out a lot clearer than a cut cross would do. Or you could, if you wanted, wait until they were cooked and use writing icing to pipe, or any other icing to pipe across them at the end. But these ones I like because it's a really nice, obvious big cross which we put in the middle to make that a little bit thinner so that it will pipe. Now I've got a reusable piping bag, which is really useful. And what is here in this cup, I've just kind of turned it inside out over the top of the cup to make it a bit easier to put the paste in. So as you can see, it's really thick. It's quite a sticky, gluey paste. You can actually use flour and water to make glue. So as long as it's thin enough to pipe, then we should be okay. So I'm going to tip that into my piping bag. There you go. Not that messy. Doesn't look very nice. But you're not going to taste it, so you don't need to worry too much about what it looks like. Right, just fry the chive, a little bit more chocolate so that I can finish this. There we go. Okay. So if you have them all in a straight line, you'll be able to just go straight over the top and then the bottom. So you can tell there's more chocolate here, so it's not stupid. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to move this a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go this way first. It doesn't have to be perfect piping, of course. It's just it really doesn't matter how messy it is. To make sure that you do a better job than me of squeezing from the top. Otherwise, you will lose half your paste into the top of your piping bag. Really are very messy, so yours will probably be tidier than these, but if they're not, it doesn't matter. Okay, and then we're going to go up the other way. Just like that. So it doesn't particularly matter either if you run out of paste, if you do them too thick, because as it's just flour and water, you saw how quick it was you can easily make yourself some more. Right, so that's one tray. I'm just going to finish up the other tray and I'm going to put these in the oven. They're going to go in for about 20 minutes until they're golden brown, so keep an eye on them, and then join us again in about 20 minutes for the very last step, which is going to put a glaze on them. We'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we are on the final stage now. You've done really well if you're still with us. My hot cross buns, as you can see, have just come out of the oven. They are looking quite brown and they'll be nice and hollow. I've not touched them because they are very hot, obviously they'll just be in the oven. But for those last couple of minutes while they were finishing up, I just put a couple of tablespoons of marmalade into a pan and heated it up so it's ready. You could use apricot jam or any other sort of yellowy flavour, yellowy sort of jam, just don't use strawberry, that kind of thing. I'm going to use it now for a glaze. So I am just bribing the child with chocolate while we finish these up because she's bored of baking and does not want to help anymore. So before I put these onto a cooling rack to cool off, we're just going to brush them with a little bit of my marmalade glaze, and that will make them look sticky and give it a little bit of a sweet thing on the top. Ooh. I'm start playing with my cupboards here, isn't she? So I'll do a front one in a minute so you can see the difference that it makes. Now I've got a nice silicone pastry brush. These pastry brushes are wooden with bristles, but you could use a paintbrush if you don't have a particular pastry brush. Just make sure it's nice and clean. So I'll do one over here so you can hopefully you can see that the crosses are showing through nicely. They show through better when the buns are baked. The buns go a bit brown, but the cross keeps that nice white colour on it. There we go. So I'm going to finish glazing these off, and then I will put a picture so you can see how we've ended up to. Hot cross buns are really nice if you eat them warm and buttered, but if you don't want, obviously you don't want to eat them on the long go, then they work just as well cold as well. Yeah, dig into your hot cross buns, enjoy them. Maybe you could listen to some songs about the cross or about salvation while you're eating them. We will see you again hopefully tomorrow when we make pineapple upside down cake, and the day after for Easter as we come to the end of our week. See you tomorrow then. Bye.